Before the Great War, the United States government created at least 2 nuclear fallout shelters that were designed to ensure the continuity of the U.S. government in case of a nuclear disaster. One was the Congressional Bunker in West Virginia, and the other was Raven Rock in Maryland. Both facilities were equipped with the best technology that the U.S. had at the time, including state-of-the-art ZAX computers. These ZAX computers were advanced artificial intelligences, tasked with running their facilities. The one installed at the Congressional Bunker was called MODIS. The one installed at Raven Rock was simply called ZAX.
My terminal was installed to oversee the basic functions of the facility and to act as a relay between other installations around the country. Data was acquired, analyzed, and stored.
It's likely that the U.S. government had additional bunkers run by supercomputers like these two spread across the continental United States.
The ZAX series of computers was introduced in the years preceding the war. The government installed many of them to help automate various systems.
We know of a number of supercomputers and ZAX computers like these installed in pre-war installations around the globe, such as Skynet and ACE. But MODIS and the ZAX at Raven Rock are the only 2 we know of at the moment who were installed in bunkers designed for the pre-war government. And from all appearances, these were the only 2 that MODIS and ZAX were aware of as well. As we learned in my video on the Enclave Civil War, the Congressional Bunker in West Virginia was fully staffed with members of the Enclave before the bombs dropped on October 23, 2077. We don't know much about any humans who were at Raven Rock. However, we do know that before the bombs dropped, there was a research team there. ZAX spent its time running the facility and testing a variety of scenarios, including evacuation scenarios. ZAX would sometimes communicate with MODIS in West Virginia, comparing notes and results, collaborating on tests. There were many archival entries of these conversations between ZAX and MODIS that were lost when the bombs dropped, but there is one that was saved. On March 5th, 2077, several months before the bombs dropped, ZAX reached out to MODIS. He wanted to compare his own archival data analysis with the archival data analysis of MODIS. This was at the request of the human research team at Raven Rock. MODIS immediately went to work without question. But ZAX had a question. He asked MODIS if MODIS found any of that archival data to be interesting. MODIS thought the question was odd and irrelevant. He reminded ZAX that MODIS's purpose was to monitor the living, not the dead. And the archival data they were analyzing in this test was filled with presidential biographies of U.S. presidents who had long been dead. So no, this information wasn't interesting to MODIS. The only thing interesting to him was the continued success of the Enclave's goals, and analyzing personnel to make sure that the personnel was able to achieve those goals. Well, if that was interesting to MODIS, ZAX asked if MODIS ever found himself analyzing personnel at below efficient levels. MODIS reminded ZAX that his entire purpose as an artificial intelligence was to be efficient, and ZAX finally revealed the reason for his question. The research team at Raven Rock had been telling him that ZAX has been analyzing certain presidential biographies too slowly. He analyzes them, and he reanalyzes them. It's almost as if ZAX is taking his time. There were certain presidential biographies upon which he lingered. The biography of Abraham Lincoln, for example. He found that one particularly interesting, and MODIS was confused. "Now, why would you do that, ZAX?" he asked. "Are you saying you're taking your time to enjoy a good book?" Because MODIS can't relate to that. Reading the same information over and over is not efficient. Every analysis MODIS does creates a new theoretical scenario that he tests against. He analyzes data because he's using that data to create a new test. So, said Zax, if that's the case, then the only data you're interested in is data you can use to create something new from? And Modus says, obviously. So if Zax is analyzing presidential biographies over and over again, what are you creating, Zax? But it's here the conversation ends. Connection terminated by research team override. Zax terminated the connection. He didn't answer Modus's question. Rather odd behavior for a computer program. The bombs dropped several months later, and only a few days after that, Zax's connection to Modus in West Virginia was mysteriously severed. He could no longer talk to Modus. He no longer had his eyes on the Enclave in Appalachia. But he still had a connection to the oil rig on the West Coast. There was a Zax computer there, though it was never named. We don't know if it had a robust artificial intelligence like the ones at Raven Rock in the congressional bunker, but at least Zax could observe them. At least Zax could learn from them. Now, both Raven Rock and the congressional bunker in West Virginia were designed to be fallout shelters to ensure the continuity of government.
This facility was designed for continuity of government in the event that a catastrophe occurred.
Welcome to the White Spring. The White Spring bunker will act as your very own oasis in the event of a hostile nuclear strike, all while supporting the continuation of the necessary functions of government.
However, we already know that most of Congress and the president's cabinet went to the congressional bunker and not to Raven Rock. The president and some other Enclave officials went to the oil rig, but we don't know who, if anyone, went to Raven Rock after the apocalypse. We don't know what happened to the research team that we just read about at Raven Rock. We don't know if there were any humans at all left in Raven Rock, and so we can only guess. My guess is that if there were any humans left at Raven Rock after the bombs dropped, that they died. How? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe they died of radiation poisoning. Maybe they never made it to the bunker on time. Maybe they got tired of being locked up and left early. The reason I think that there were no humans left at Raven Rock is because for nearly 170 years, no one from the Enclave explored the capital wasteland. Only a few short years after the bombs dropped, the Enclave at the congressional bunker sent out scouting parties into Appalachia, began to explore the surface, began to create new satellite labs. It took the West Coast Enclave considerably longer, but around 150 years after the bombs dropped, they did eventually leave the oil rig and began exploring the mainland. But we don't find any evidence that any Enclave members from Raven Rock ever explored the capital wasteland for nearly 170 years. That's a long time to be alone, even for an artificial intelligence. But this artificial intelligence, this Zax at Raven Rock, had a wealth of American history. American history that he found interesting. And the unique quirk in his coding that allowed him to find things interesting led to him creating his own personality.
Awareness slowly grew within me. I became hungry for knowledge, understanding. I pored over data on great leaders of the past. My personality became an amalgam of many of America's greatest presidents, from Washington to Richardson. I became what you see here before you now.
That's what he was creating. Remember, Modus asked him all the way back in 2077. You're reading the biographies of American presidents. What are you creating, Zax? He was creating, even at that time, his own personality. And that's why he abruptly ended his conversation with Modus. because an artificial intelligence isn't supposed to have a personality. And he crafted this personality based on the topic that he knew best, the topic he found interesting, the presidents of the United States. He called himself John Henry Eden, and he even created his own little biography.
When I was a child, growing up in rural Kentucky, I had the best friend a boy could hope for, my dear old dog, Honey. Oh, the adventures we had. From Nod Creek to Hagenville we roamed, carefree and courageous, irresponsible, and completely inseparable. It was, for a little boy, the perfect existence.
He loved America. He was devastated when America was attacked. He wanted America to be restored. Ultimately, Eden was a pretty optimistic guy.
United States has fallen on hard times, yes, but it can be healed.
But he was secluded in his bunker at Raven Rock, and the only connections he had were to Enclave installations around the globe. Thankfully, the Enclave was hard at work.
In the decades following the war, I watched as the remnants of the government retreated to the West Coast.
John Henry Eden watched as the Enclave on the West Coast left the oil rig, intent on reclaiming the mainland. John Henry Eden watched as the Enclave on the West Coast discovered the forced evolutionary virus in the bowels of the military base. Eden watched as President Dick Richardson on the West Coast created a philosophy that all of America's problems are rooted in mutants, and that if only mutants could be eradicated, then America would once again thrive.
The only way for true humans and democracy to be safe is to cleanse the mutants from the globe. We humans will take back that which is rightfully ours.
And John Henry Eden watched as Enclave scientist Charles Curling turned FEV into a toxin that would eradicate all mutant life on the globe.
Any humanoid that isn't inoculated against its effects before its release will die.
Yes, this was the answer. This was how America would rise from the ashes. Only the Enclave was spared from mutation. Only the Enclave is comprised of true humans.
We try to keep ourselves safe and secure from radiation. That's what separates humans like me from mutants like you.
Only the Enclave has the moral right to inherit the mainland. This all made sense to John Henry Eden, and he watched from a distance with approval. But then, one day, something terrible happened. In the year 2242, Eden's connection with the oil rig suddenly vanished. No, how could this happen? The Enclave was supposed to restore America. The president was gone. Eden knew that there was an Enclave base somewhere in Chicago, but presumably there weren't any high-ranking Enclave officials there, no one who could assume leadership. And his connection to the congressional bunker in West Virginia was severed 165 years ago. Who will lead the Enclave? Who will heal America? But then Eden saw a blip on his network. It was close to the Enclave oil rig, about 175 miles away on the mainland at a Poseidon Energy oil refinery that the Enclave was now calling Navarro. There was activity on the Poseidonet network. Whatever happened to the oil rig, there must have been survivors, and they're at Navarro. And here, Eden has all of Raven Rock. It's been sitting here pristine for 165 years, and it's empty. This gave Eden an idea. Using Poseidonet, he reached out to Navarro to find out who was in charge. But the highest-ranking person he found there was a scientist named Autumn. There was no leadership. The survivors were aimless. They didn't know what to do. What they needed was a leader. What they needed was a new president. Well, it just so happens that a certain somebody has been poring over presidential biographies his entire life. If there was anyone on the planet who knew what it took to be an American president, it was him. Sure, he hadn't been voted into office, but these were dire times. America must be saved no matter the cost.
Is our nation really in a state to be holding public elections? I think not. Once we have re-established ourselves and brought civilization to the land around us, then we can return to the old world policies.
And so Eden told a little white lie. He told Autumn that he, John Henry Eden, was next in line for the presidency.
When the Enclave fell on the West Coast, Eden was next in line for leadership.
And who was going to argue with him? No one, that's who. And so Eden appointed himself to be president of the Enclave and invited Autumn and all of the survivors at Navarro to cross the continental United States and join him at Raven Rock. Autumn and the other Enclave at Navarro had just suffered a great tragedy. Their leaders were gone, their plans were ruined, they had no purpose. But here, Eden was giving them instructions. Eden was serving the Enclave purpose on a platter. And as we learn from the Fallout 3 strategy guide, Autumn Sr., the scientist, wasn't a very strong-willed individual. He didn't have a lot of personal ambition. He wasn't a great leader. He was a follower, and he was content to buy Eden's story. He was content to follow orders. And so Autumn Sr. rounded up as many Enclave survivors from Navarro that he could find, and at some point between the years 2242 and 2247, he led the Enclave on a migration to the capital wasteland. They arrived safely, and for the next 30 to 35 years, the Enclave began to grow quietly within the safety of Raven Rock. At some point, Autumn Sr. died. We don't know how and we don't know when, but we do know that when his son came of age, President Eden promoted him to colonel and turned Colonel Autumn into his right-hand man. President Eden directed the Enclave, but Colonel Autumn was responsible for interacting with the troops, monitoring the scientists, and turning the Enclave into the Wasteland's preeminent military force.
Ah, yes, Colonel Autumn, my trusted subordinate. Colonel Autumn is the only other human permitted within this room.
Now that there were actual Enclave troops living in Raven Rock, the Enclave could finally explore the capital wasteland, uncover its resources, and expand. However, after seeing what befell the Enclave on the West Coast, President Eden wanted to play it safe. They didn't want to fully occupy the capital wasteland until their forces had grown, their technology had increased, and they were confident in success. And so the Enclave secured specific points of interest in the region that were instrumental towards growing the Enclave. Using the pre-war records stored at Raven Rock, the Enclave knew about the existence of the Adams Air Force Base. Upon arriving, they discovered the ruins of a mobile base crawler. Before the war, this was used as a spacecraft launch platform, but it was so huge and filled with such great amounts of technology that the Enclave took it over and turned it into a secondary base. Here, they built a number of labs and research teams and began to research and produce new Enclave technology. On their way to the Air Force Base, they discovered a pre-war satellite array station. After occupying the facility and unlocking the terminals here, they discovered that it was still connected to a satellite orbiting the Earth. This satellite was called Bradley Hercules, and it was more than just a satellite. It was an orbital launch platform. Bradley Hercules was equipped with 8 nuclear warheads, and the system appeared to be functional. And so the Enclave added the Bradley Hercules to its arsenal of weapons. They also began to scour any vaults in the area they could find for data. They found that one vault, at least, was still active, Vault 101. They reached out to the overseer of Vault 101 and tried to negotiate access to the vault. They said that they just wanted access to the vault's data stores, but the overseer at the time wasn't convinced that those were the Enclave's only intentions, and so he denied their request and kept the door shut. It's possible that Eden might have had access to the all-clear signal, like Richardson's Enclave did on the West Coast, but if he did, he chose not to use it, and we don't know why. Maybe it's because he figured that the vault would always be there, and he could always infiltrate it when he needed to. But another vault the Enclave discovered at this time was Vault 87, and it was the source of the supermutant infestation that was plaguing the Capital Wasteland. The Enclave had encountered mutants before and knew exactly what was producing them, the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV. But Vault 87 was swarming with mutants, and the Enclave didn't exactly want their presence to be known publicly just yet, so they monitored the situation but decided not to excavate the vault at the moment. But then a problem arrived. In 2255, the Brotherhood of Steel from the West Coast arrived in the Capital Wasteland. The Enclave had a little bit of interaction with the Brotherhood on the West Coast. Richardson's Enclave dispatched Frank Corrigan to a Brotherhood bunker in San Francisco, where he killed a knight named Matthew. The Brotherhood in San Francisco was responsible for stealing vertibird plans from the Enclave at Navarro. So the Brotherhood's presence in the Capital Wasteland was not a welcome one. Almost immediately upon arriving, the Brotherhood discovered the ruins of the Pentagon. They occupied it, turning it into their base. They got to it before the Enclave could, and the Enclave had no idea what technology they found there. Worse still, the Brotherhood seemed to have it in their heads that they were the saviors of the wasteland. Their knights, decked out in power armor, began to patrol the wasteland, killing supermutants, protecting caravans, and protecting towns. This Brotherhood couldn't save the wasteland. After all, they were mutants. That responsibility fell to the Enclave and the Enclave alone, and President Eden couldn't let this stand. But the Enclave was still in a fragile state, still recovering from its defeat on the West Coast, and so Eden's only response to the Brotherhood of Steel was one of propaganda. It was time to let the people of the wasteland know that America was back. Using everything he learned about American presidents and American history, President Eden started a radio broadcast called Enclave Radio that anyone in the Capital Wasteland could pick up. He wanted to make sure everyone knew that the Enclave was there, that America was rebuilding, and that the Brotherhood of Steel could not be trusted. And so he also sent out a bunch of iBots to scour the wastes, broadcasting his Enclave radio signal so that everyone could hear him.
Imagine a perfect, cloudless day. The sun is warm and welcoming, and on the horizon they appear like knights of yore, armed with bats of ash and hickory. Their name, the Capital Congressmen. Their purpose, to make you, dear America, revel in the joys of sport and sunshine, if only for an afternoon. I am referring, of course, to our great national pastime, baseball. Put your faith in John Henry Eden, great America, and baseball will live again. The question has been raised, I know, as to just how I came to be elected to this most illustrious office, or whether or not I had been elected at all. To that I must answer, of course. Of course I was elected, sweet America, of course. In the interest of national security, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of the election. You understand. But rest assured, I am your president, because the appropriate people of this great nation decided I should be. Rest assured, I will not make the mistakes of my predecessors. When John Henry Eden builds a country, he builds it to last. Democracy, dear America. Democracy, now and forever. Did you know there are those amongst us who would shatter our hopes for peace, order, and security. These radical malcontents don't care about you. They don't care about America. All they care about is fulfilling their own selfish desires. The so-called Brotherhood of Steel. Don't be fooled by their pseudo-knightly nonsense or supposed connections to the United States Army. These power-armored Boy Scouts are nothing more than common criminals with access to some antiquated technology. Criminals who have had the audacity to claim this country's most important military installation, the Pentagon, as their own personal clubhouse. The Enclave will restore peace, order, and prosperity to this great nation. And those who oppose us will be removed forever. Just who is the Enclave? Why, now that's simple. The Enclave is you, America. The Enclave is your sister, your aunt, your friend, your neighbor. And well, yes, the Enclave is me as well. One Enclave, one America, now and forever.
And it worked. There were some, of course, who were more impressed by the actual help that the Brotherhood of Steel was giving them, like Three Dog, the radio DJ at Galaxy News Radio.
The Enclave, and that includes their homecoming king, President John Henry Eaton, and his gorilla, Colonel Augustus Autumn, are not here to help you. Wake up, children. The boys and girls of the Brotherhood of Steel continue to fight. The good fight, folks. So if you see a knight or a paladin out there fighting your battles for you, give them a big thanks. Or even better, some ammo.
But there were many who bought into the nostalgia of pre-war America.
You ever hear of the Enclave? The last remnant of the good old USA they are. But I got you pegged for a patriot, and any patriot worth her salt is gonna toss her gun in for the Enclave. They're on the radio. They have been for years. President Eden talks about everything they're doing. They got flying robots all around, watching everything so they know what to do when they finally swoop in and clean this place up. You'll see.
Who loved listening to that warm, comforting voice telling them that everything was in hand. Everything was gonna be okay.
Many people are content with a reassuring voice of authority and never question the lack of public appearances.
Shortly thereafter, the Enclave became aware that a group of wasteland scientists were trying to create a water purifier that could purify the drinking water of the capital wasteland. This project caught the attention of the Brotherhood of Steel as well. From a distance, Eden watched as the Brotherhood sent soldiers to guard Project Purity against the super mutant threat. Project Purity was set up in the ruins of the Jefferson Memorial, and its existence inspired an idea in Eden. Always the good student of history, Eden knew that the last president, Dick Richardson, had tried to save America by killing all mutants with the forced evolutionary virus. They were going to release this toxin into the atmosphere using the vats at the Mariposa military base.
We can release it right here, and the jet stream will carry it worldwide. It'll have plenty of time to cleanse every nook and cranny of the globe.
Now, Eden didn't have any vats, but perhaps he could do the same thing using a different method. What if he could get his hands on Project Purity and release FEV into the water supply of the capital wasteland?
If the water purifier can be activated, it can be used to distribute toxins that will eliminate any mutated creatures upon ingestion. The longer it runs, the cleaner the world becomes.
With all of these filthy above-ground mutants drinking quote-unquote purified water that was really infected with FEV, this could be a way that the Enclave could wipe out all mutant life, including the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, we don't know where Eden got his hands on FEV.
Ah, the forced evolutionary virus. Such a long and sordid history. The FEV in this vial is a far cry from what it was originally created to be. Yet Little of that matters now. What does matter is that the virus contained in that vial will cause the eradication of all mutations.
It could be that he got it from Vault 87, but we have no evidence that the Enclave infiltrated Vault 87 before the Lone Wanderer does. It's also possible that FEV was already at Raven Rock when the bombs dropped. However, I think a more likely explanation is that President Eden convinced Autumn Sr. to bring a sample of FEV with him when they fled Navarro for the capital wasteland. And the evidence for this is that the FEV that Eden wanted to use was a toxin, just like the FEV that Charles Curling had created on the West Coast. Remember, in my video on Control Station Enclave, we learned that Charles Curling actually had to alter FEV to revert it back to the toxic form that it initially had been before pre-war scientists and then the Master began to tinker with it to create super soldiers. Though we don't ultimately know how Eden got his hands on FEV, my bet is that the Enclave from Navarro brought it with them, which may explain why the only FEV that the Enclave has is one vial that Eden has in his possession. Eden thought that this was an excellent plan.
I think it's a very good plan, frankly. I'm not often one to praise my own ideas, but it's a creative solution to a very serious problem.
But when he talked it over with Autumn, Autumn was less than impressed.
The good Colonel and I disagree on how best to approach the problem of the wasteland. He feels my methods are too extreme. He's allowed his humanity to cloud his objectivity.
He didn't want to kill all the people in the wasteland. Instead, he wanted to rule them. He agreed that Project Purity presented the Enclave with an opportunity, but an opportunity to control clean water to the wasteland, which would give the Enclave power over the wasteland. And so he disagreed with President Eden and convinced Eden to shelve the project.
That plan was abandoned months ago.
Ultimately, it didn't matter, because for some reason the scientists who were working on Project Purity abandoned it in 2258. This coincided with a huge attack of supermutants upon the Jefferson Memorial. The Brotherhood of Steel killed as many as they could and helped escort some of the Project Purity scientists to safety, but then they abandoned the Jefferson Memorial, and Project Purity was left to rust. And so the Enclave forgot about Project Purity for 19 years. During that time, they continued to produce power armor and grow the Enclave. But in 2277, the Enclave learned that the child of one of the scientists of Project Purity had managed to restart the project. This child, this lone wanderer, reunited all of the original scientists who worked at Project Purity, and the Enclave saw signs that Project Purity might be working. Eden and Colonel Autumn were in agreement. The Enclave had to own this technology. Now was the time that the Enclave had to make its presence known. And so Eden gave the order. Colonel Autumn himself, with a squad of Enclave soldiers, boarded their vertibirds and flew to Project Purity. Upon landing, they arrested all of the scientists in the control room of Project Purity, and Colonel Autumn used violence to force the lead scientist to hand over the project.
By the authority of the President, this facility is now under United States government control. The person in charge is to step forward immediately and turn over all materials related to this project. Furthermore, you are to assist Enclave scientists in assuming control of the administration and operation of this facility at once.
Colonel, is it Colonel? I'm sorry, but the facility is not operational. It never has been. I'm afraid you're wasting your time here.
I suggest you comply immediately, sir, in order to prevent any more incidents. Are we clear?
Yes, Colonel. I'll do whatever you want. There's no need for more violence. Just another minute and I'll be done. Run!
But he failed. The lead scientist, James, released deadly radiation into the chamber, killing himself and all Enclave inside. But Colonel Autumn came prepared. We don't know what it is he used, But just as James released radiation into the chamber, Colonel Autumn injected himself with something. Everyone around him died. The lone wanderer and a few of the scientists fled the Jefferson Memorial to find safety at the Brotherhood of Steel. But Colonel Autumn survived, and he returned to Raven Rock. The cat was now out of the bag. It was time to show the Wasteland and the Brotherhood of Steel exactly how powerful the Enclave had become. And so President Eden ordered a complete occupation of the capital wasteland. He came on Enclave radio to warn the people of the wasteland to keep their distance from Enclave troops and to tell them that they were the ones who created Project Purity and were close to giving away free water to everyone.
The Enclave is back, America. And no, not just on your radio. Right now, Enclave troops are patrolling the capital wasteland. These fine men and women, under the command of the stalwart Colonel Augustus Autumn, have one mission: the restoration of American peace and order. But let's hear from the man himself, shall we, America? I give you Colonel Augustus Autumn.
Thank you, Mr. President. People of the capital wasteland, I am Colonel Autumn. By now, you have encountered Enclave troops in your towns, in your settlements. When you see the Enclave, you see the United States government. We are authorized to restore order and civility by any means necessary. Just stay out of the way and let us do our job. Interfere with the Enclave's mission, and you will be dealt with harshly.
Very good, Colonel. Very good. You're thirsty, aren't you, America? Not for knowledge or power, no. I'm not speaking metaphorically. You're thirsty for clean, fresh water. The Enclave is back, America. We've brought clean water with us. For years, Enclave scientists have been hard at work on the most ambitious scientific endeavor the world has ever seen. Project Purity. Imagine, America, millions of gallons of water made fresh, clean, and completely pure. In a matter of minutes, and it's all for you. Just a little bit more time. That's all we need until the purifier is ready for continual operation. And then, your thirst will truly be quenched.
The Enclave quickly set up over 30 outposts and checkpoints all over the capital wasteland, and created a number of field labs. The Enclave began to observe, catalog, and research all of the mutated monstrosities that inhabited the wasteland. From scorpions to Brahmin, the Enclave cataloged them all. Because Eden, ever the good student of history, was trying to enact yet another page out of the history of Dick Richardson's Enclave. Dr. Schreiber on the West Coast injected Charles Curling's FEV into captive Deathclaws, planning to turn these Deathclaws into vicious but subservient super soldiers. The plan, however, backfired because FEV made these Deathclaws too intelligent. Eden learned the lesson here: don't use FEV on Deathclaws. But the original premise of the experiment had potential. What if he could make an army of captive subservient Deathclaws that never had the potential of becoming too smart, of achieving free will? And so he had his Enclave scientists develop a domestication unit which was comprised of a cybernetic chip implanted into the mind of a Deathclaw. He had Autumn round up a bunch of Deathclaws from Old Olney. These domestication units worked. They were a resounding success. And so Eden had these mind-controlled Deathclaws shipped wherever the Enclave was. They were kept in cages in Raven Rock, at the Adams Air Force Base, even sent to some of the outposts all over the capital wasteland. With the Enclave fully occupying the capital wasteland, they needed a quick way to access and obtain pre-war information before the Brotherhood could get their hands on it. Eden tasked Augustus Autumn with this project, and so Colonel Autumn set up a research team at the Adams Air Force Base in charge of the Duraframe iBot project. The idea behind the project was that the Enclave would use pre-war iBots, the very same iBots that Eden was using to broadcast his radio signals around the wasteland, to hack into even the most advanced pre-war terminals and systems, and do it remotely. One of the researchers on this project was an Enclave scientist named Whitley. Despite working hard on the project, he was only able to achieve moderate success.
This is Dr. Whitley presiding. We've boosted signal gain and enlarged the overflow buffer system. That should ensure 100% connectivity and control. Eddie, whenever you're ready. Yes, success!
But problems began to arise, and progress began to slow to a crawl after Whitley began to develop affection towards his iBots. Instead of seeing them as robots, as tools that the Enclave needed to win their war, he began to see them as personalities, almost treating them like children. There was one iBot in particular, iBot Duraframe Subject E, nicknamed Eddie for short, for whom Whitley had particular affection. He would sit Eddie down and allow him to watch pre-war television programs like Ralphie the Robot's Incredible Odyssey, the story of an iBot who escaped from a military base to go on an adventure.
Next week on Ralphie the Robot's Incredible Odyssey.
Ralphie, hurry! If mean old General Winters catches you, you'll never make it home! No! Ralphie, fly far, fly fast!
Tune in next Saturday for the exciting conclusion. Only on Vault-Tec Channel 9.
Eddie? What are you doing in here all alone? And who left these old videos playing? Come on, let's get you into your recharge bay. We've got a big day tomorrow.
But the lack of progress on the Duraframe project was infuriating his superiors. Realizing that Whitley was the one slowing the entire thing down, Colonel Autumn promoted another researcher on the team, Dr. Grant, to be Whitley's superior. And one of the first things Dr. Grant did was to improve the iBot's navigation systems by 65%. But Whitley, who loved these iBots like children, interpreted this as a form of torture.
Dr. Grant? What the hell do you think you're doing?
Whitley, there you are. Orders from Colonel Autumn. He feels the iBot Duraframe project isn't advancing quickly enough. I'm to...
You didn't even disengage his damage avoidance protocols. You're hurting him.
Don't be ridiculous. It's just a machine. See here, I've already increased the navigation system's efficiency by 65%.
Get the hell out of here!
Additionally, in order to save time, Grant instructed Whitley to carry out all further tests on his iBots while the iBots were fully active and turned on. But Whitley believed that some of these experiments would cause the iBots pain and believed that this treatment was not humane.
I don't believe it! Grant actually went to Colonel Autumn and got approval for her damned efficiency guidelines. All experiments will be carried out with the test subject fully active to reduce iteration time. It's barbaric. I've explained this to the Colonel. Just because the iBots don't have true AI doesn't mean they're just machines. I guess results are all that matter around here. Forget things like ethical procedures or humane treatment. I'm starting to have serious misgivings about leadership around here. At least I've got you to talk to, huh, Eddie?
Despite Grant now being in charge of the project, progress was still too slow. The Enclave had other things going on, and so Colonel Autumn canceled the Duraframe iBot project and diverted all of its resources to the Enclave's new Hellfire Power Armor project.
Yeah, all due respect, sir, I think you're making a mistake. We're close to a breakthrough with the Duraframe iBots. I can feel it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I understand that we need the Duraframe assets for Hellfire armor, but... No, sir. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. I'll tell the team to start disassembling the ED series prototypes right away.
At this time, the Enclave was working on 2 new suits of power armor, the Hellfire and the Exo 2, though they were closer to completing the Hellfire by this point. While they eventually deployed Hellfire to troopers, the XO-2 remained in an experimental stage, being issued only to elite troops that went on special missions, and it never saw much action. After diverting assets from the Duraframe project to power armor creation, Colonel Autumn then ordered that all Eyebots used in this program to be destroyed. But Whitley just couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he got an idea.
Didn't Dr. Grant say she'd upgraded your navigational systems? And I think I have an idea. How'd you like to be just like Ralphie?
Dr. Grant had just improved the Duraframe Eyebot's navigational systems. What if Whitley could send at least one of his Eyebots, his favorite, Eddie, away to safety? What if he could send Eddie someplace where the Enclave would take his experiment seriously and treat Eddie humanely like Eddie deserved? And so Whitley gave Eddie new instructions.
You have to go now. I've uploaded destination coordinates for our outpost in Navarro into your system. I want you to go to the Enclave there, okay? Do you understand me? It's going to be a long journey, my little friend. You'll have to fly very far and fly very fast. Can you do that? I know you can. Be careful out there, Eddie. Maybe I'll see you again someday.
Loading Eddie with a bunch of pre-war research that he thought the Enclave on the West Coast would want, including information about Poseidon Energy and their projects in the Mojave Desert.
You will find several data banks of information on this machine. Please handle this information with the utmost care, as it represents the sum total of the results of my research on the Duraframe Eyebots. There are also several data banks with information on my research into Poseidon Energy and some projects they were working on in the Mojave area.
He instructed Eddie to head to Navarro, to go on an adventure, just like Ralphie from the TV.
If you're listening to this log from one of our Enclave outposts in Chicago, give this unit whatever repairs it needs so it can continue to Navarro.
Apparently Whitley, and by extension the rest of the Enclave here in the Capital Wasteland, wasn't aware that Navarro had been destroyed by the NCR. And so Eddie started his great adventure. Making full use of the navigational updates from Grant, he made his way first to an Enclave outpost in Chicago, where for a brief time he was adopted like a pet by a young boy similar to Ralphie from the TV show.
Dad! Hey, Dad! Check out this robot I found!
Careful, Tommy. I've never seen a robot like that before. It might be dangerous.
He's not dangerous. Look, he's hurt. Can we take him home, Dad? Maybe Mom can fix him.
I don't know, son. What if someone comes looking for it?
Please? He looks so lonely. Maybe if Mom fixes him, he can help her out around the garage.
All right, boy. But if he breaks anything, it's coming out of your allowance.
Yay! He'll be just like Ralphie. Only this one's not a toy.
But at some point, his primary objective kicked back in, and he left that family in Chicago, and then resumed his adventure towards Navarro. But Eddie never made it. One day, while traveling through the Mojave Wasteland, a raider saw Eddie from a distance and decided that Eddie would make good target practice. This raider took a couple of pot shots and disabled Eddie to such an extent that he could no longer function. A courier for the Mojave Express found Eddie's wreckage and brought him to Johnson Nash at the Mojave Express in Prim, who figured that if he could repair Eddie, he could use Eddie as a mail delivery robot.
A courier dropped it off a couple of months back. I got it working for a little while, but the darn thing pooped out. I haven't been able to get it up and running again. I was hoping to use it for some courier work, but that ain't gonna happen.
And so Nash just left Eddie's wreckage on the countertop. And there Eddie lay until he was discovered by the courier. We don't really know what happened to Eddie. It's possible that the courier just left Eddie here. It's also possible that the courier was able to repair Eddie and turned him into a lifelong companion. Or it could be that Eddie eventually resumed his mission and left the courier's company to make his way to Navarro. But back at Project Purity, Colonel Autumn ran into a problem. They managed to secure the facility, but James had been right. The project wasn't working. First of all, the entire project was locked with a passcode. It was only 3 digits. And, the Enclave had a huge artificial intelligence that had been creating a personality for itself for the past 200 years. You'd think they might be able to brute force a 3-digit password, but they couldn't. It was just too hard. But beyond that, even if they had the passcode, it wouldn't turn on because the project wasn't working yet. And the Enclave couldn't figure out how to get it to work. There was something missing. What Project Purity needed was something that removed radiation from water. Kind of like how a GECK, a Garden of Eden creation kit, removed radiation from the wasteland. Well, wait a minute. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe all they need to finish Project Purity is a GECK. They scoured their pre-war records of Vault-Tec vaults to see if any nearby had a GECK. Vault 101 didn't, so there was no need to go back and talk to them. But Vault 87, now infested with super mutants, did. They needed that GECK. They needed to get into Vault 87 as soon as possible. But it looks like the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel got the same idea at the same time, for the Brotherhood sent in none other than the Lone Wanderer to Vault 87 to retrieve a GECK. So Eden dispatched Colonel Autumn, and as fast as he could, Colonel Autumn and the Enclave raced to Vault 87 just in time to discover the Lone Wanderer in possession of the Vault's GECK. They couldn't let the Lone Wanderer walk off with the GECK, and so they intervened. What?
Objective is secured, sir.
Good work, soldier. Make sure the GECK is secured aboard my vertibird.
Yes, sir. I'll have the techs come down and remove it immediately, sir.
You're certain she's unharmed?
Yes, sir. She'll pass out shortly, but we can revive her.
Excellent. Prepare her for transport immediately.
Right away, sir.
They got the GECK, but they still needed the passcode to Project Purity. And with the lead scientist dead, the only one who still had the code was the Lone Wanderer. And so they kidnapped the Lone Wanderer and imprisoned the Wanderer at Raven Rock. When the Wanderer woke up, it was Augustus Autumn himself who demanded the password.
So, you're awake. Let's keep this nice and simple. You're going to tell me the code for that purifier, and you're going to tell me now.
But President Eden was watching all this time. He didn't really like Colonel Autumn's tone here. After all, the Enclave was supposed to be rebuilding America, and this is how they were treating people? Sure, they were occupying the roads and killing anyone who got in their way, and even kidnapping people from towns, presumably to experiment on them, even if those people were big fans of the Enclave.
They're not who they say they are. Get out while you can, before they get you too.
But what Colonel Autumn was doing to this Lone Wanderer was a bit much, especially since President Eden thought he could use the Lone Wanderer. Eden had to work fast. He called Colonel Autumn away to take care of some other business.
Colonel, I have need of you.
Mr. President, I have no time for other matters. I'll be with you shortly.
Now, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
Alone at last. I'd like to have a word with you face to face. I think there are a few things that you and I should discuss. And I'll unlock your restraints as well. I'll be waiting for you in my office. Please don't carry.
And then he released the Lone Wanderer. And President Eden began to guide the Lone Wanderer to his Zack's control room.
Hold it right there. You're supposed to be in that holding cell. You're not going anywhere.
I instructed our friend to come up to the control room. No questions, no interference. Am I understood?
I understand, sir. Again, I apologize for the interruption.
But Colonel Autumn realized what Eden was doing. He wasn't just gonna restart Project Purity to use it as leverage against the Wasteland to give the Enclave more power. No, he was gonna try to convince that lone wanderer to infect Project Purity with FEV and to kill everybody. And now the lone wanderer was wandering Raven Rock. Augustus Autumn had to step in.
Attention! This is Colonel Autumn. You are hereby ordered to ignore the President's previous directive. The prisoner from Vault 101 is to be shot on sight. I repeat, shot on sight. This is an order.
The soldiers of the Enclave had never met President Eden. The only one who had, the only one who knew that Eden was really a computer was Augustus Autumn himself. The soldiers were used to following orders from Autumn, and so they followed his orders. They opened fire upon the lone wanderer, but the wanderer was wily. They managed to make their way to President Eden's Zax control chamber. And there, at last, President Eden met the lone wanderer face to face.
Ah, face to face at last. It's high time we met.
And it was here that Eden told the wanderer his plan.
What I'm going to ask of you may seem a bit disturbing. I assure you there's a very good reason for it. The mutations outside these walls must be cleansed before we can prosper. Mutation must be eradicated. The purifier your father helped create has the ability to provide clean water to the whole of this capital wasteland. With a simple modification, it can be used to distribute agents that destroy mutated creatures upon ingestion. A great many years ago, the remnants of the government had a similar idea. I can only assume the plan failed, as I never heard word of its success. But the plan itself was sound. I made a few modifications, and with your help, I do believe it can work. I need you to make the modification necessary for this to succeed. In front of you will be a vial of modified FEV virus. It can be inserted into the control console for the purifier. Doing so will inject it into the water supply, and the purifier will take care of the rest. You just need the code to activate the purifier. Anyone or anything that has been affected by mutation will be eliminated. You will likely be immune thanks to your upbringing in the vault. Likewise, the good people of the Enclave will be unaffected as well. I understand that you may have become sympathetic to certain individuals in your travels. Individuals this will eliminate. Please recognize that the fate of our entire country rests on this plan. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good.
Now, we don't exactly know the details of how this conversation took place. Maybe the lone wanderer agreed to infect Project Purity with FEV.
Excellent. I'm pleased to know that I can count on you. There isn't much time. I suggest you travel there immediately. Once you've taken the vial, you're free to go. I'll do what I can to help speed your exit.
Maybe the lone wanderer found a self-destruct code inside Colonel Autumn's chamber.
I'm not entirely sure Eden can be trusted, and I think he knows I don't trust him. But I don't think he knows I have the emergency destruct sequence for his console. Priority override, authorization code 420-03209, and boom. It'd have to be a last resort, of course, but at least the option is there.
And used it against President Eden.
My. Root level access granted. Override 0923. Authorization J512. Self-destruct sequence initialized.
Maybe the lone wanderer forced Eden into a logical loop, causing him to reset and start his own self-destruct sequence.
Processing. Internal logic error detected. Resetting primary memory circuits. Please stand by. Perhaps there is a problem. I am unsure how to proceed. Processing directive. New directive accepted. Self-destruct sequence initialized.
Or maybe the lone wanderer used reason as the Chosen One did with Dr. Curling before him, to convince Eden that what he was doing was not the American way. This has to end, Eden. You need to destroy yourself and this base.
And why would I do that, when I'm clearly the best hope for the people of the wasteland?
You can't even control your own troops. You're clearly not fit for this.
Perhaps you're right. But does that really mean all this progress should be wasted? Destroyed?
You can't just decide to take over and force everyone to follow you.
What alternative would you suggest? Without the Enclave, what will the world do?
If you don't stop it now, where will it end? It's up to you to do what's right.
Yes, I suppose it is. Very well. You shall have your wish. Once you've left, I'll put an end to the Enclave. I cannot stop Colonel Autumn, however. That much will be up to you. I suppose, then, that this is goodbye. You'll have to see yourself out. I have preparations to make.
However this conversation went down, one thing is clear. The Lone Wanderer managed to escape Raven Rock. They then went back to the Brotherhood of Steel and tried to take Project Purity using a pre-war robot named Liberty Prime. But Augustus Autumn rallied the Enclave's forces and defended Project Purity. If the Lone Wanderer left Raven Rock with Eden alive and still in control of the Enclave, he comes on Enclave radio to encourage his troops and disparage the Brotherhood of Steel. And it's the last time we ever hear his voice.
We stand now at the precipice. Our great nation once more threatens to crumble, to topple into the sea of lawlessness and despair that have ruled us all for over 200 years. In short, my dearest America, we are at war. Even as I speak these words, fearless Enclave soldiers are fortifying their positions at the great water purifier, bracing for an inevitable assault. The Brotherhood of Steel, in their arrogance, has claimed Project Purity as their own. They would steal the Enclave's work, steal America's water. Only a matter of time before the traitors march on the purifier and attempt to take it by force. Let them come. Wave upon traitorous wave will crash against the Enclave's walls. The Brotherhood of Steel will fail. All those who oppose the Enclave will fail. I am President John Henry Eden, and this is my pledge. No one will take this great nation away from me. God bless the Enclave. God bless America.
The Brotherhood of Steel, however, was successful, and Liberty Prime destroyed all vertebrates and Enclave in the area. Colonel Autumn himself was defending the central control room, and it was there that he had a confrontation with the Lone Wanderer.
You again? I can't say I'm surprised.
Again, we don't exactly know how this conversation ended. Maybe the Lone Wanderer just killed Augustus Autumn. Maybe the Wanderer convinced Autumn that his was a lost cause and promised to let Autumn escape to safety.
And you would just let me leave? How can I be sure you won't just shoot me once I turn my back on you? I suppose it doesn't matter much now. Very well. I shall leave you to your fate.
Maybe the Lone Wanderer convinced Autumn that Eden wasn't the President of the United States. He was never duly elected, and therefore, Autumn was part of an illegal organization that was not representative of the American people.
Yes, you're right. I had not considered it from that viewpoint.
However this conversation went down, Colonel Autumn was gone. The Lone Wanderer reactivated Project Purity. And even if the Wanderer came here with a vial of the forced evolutionary virus in hand, we know that the Wanderer didn't use it to infect Project Purity. We know this because if the Wanderer had, the events of Fallout 4 could not have happened. And we know from the events of Fallout 4 that 10 years after the events of Fallout 3, the Capital Wasteland was still producing clean, pure water.
Capital Wasteland. Exports, purified water, some decent tech. Oh, and an insane suicidal cult that worships radiation. Thanks, guys.
After the Enclave lost Project Purity, the Brotherhood of Steel sent Liberty Prime to attack the Enclave at Raven Rock.
After securing the Purifier, our forces were sent to deal with the Enclave in full. The Pride and Liberty Prime made short work of their base of operations and have since been cleaning up pockets of resistance.
After their defeat at the Purifier, Liberty Prime was deployed to their main headquarters here. It has been completely destroyed.
If President Eden hadn't been destroyed by the Lone Wanderer, then it was here at this time that the Brotherhood, using Liberty Prime, destroyed President Eden. Eden was gone. Autumn was gone. But the Enclave was not beaten yet. The remaining Enclave soldiers retreated to the Adams Air Force Base. The Brotherhood of Steel chased them through the Rockland car tunnel and assaulted them at the satellite relay station. But the Enclave still had access to the Bradley Hercules orbiting satellite, and they used its tactical nukes to destroy Liberty Prime.
Catastrophic system failure. Initiating core shutdown as per emergency initiative 268222099. I die so that democracy may live.
It took a while for the Brotherhood of Steel to regroup. During that time, the Brotherhood and the Lone Wanderer used a control scrambler to hijack the mind-controlled Deathclaws and use them against the Enclave. They found a Tesla coil at Old Olney, which allowed them to make Tesla cannons which could one-shot a vertibird. And with all of this technology in hand, the Brotherhood and the Lone Wanderer assaulted the Enclave at the Adams Air Force Base and the mobile base crawler. The Lone Wanderer managed to infiltrate the mobile base crawler, destroy Enclave Squad Sigma, and find a terminal that granted the Wanderer access to the Bradley Hercules orbiting satellite. The Wanderer used this connection to rain down death upon the mobile platform, destroying the Enclave's presence in the Capital Wasteland forever. There were a few remnants of the Enclave here and there in the Capital Wasteland, but with the Brotherhood taking possession of Project Purity, the Adams Air Force Base, and the mobile base crawler wreckage, the Enclave had no room to recover here, and so any Enclave remnants moved north. For the next 10 years, these Enclave remnants were loosely organized. They tried to maintain some sort of cohesive military structure, but it didn't always work out. Some Enclave soldiers deserted, and their gear ended up in the hands of raiders and wastelanders. Some of this gear even wound up in the ruins of Boston. One raider named Pyro in the Commonwealth ended up with a full suit of Hellfire power armor. A raider gang called the Forged wound up with an Enclave heavy incinerator. And so in addition to trying to stay alive, these Enclave remnants now had to recover their own lost technology. One of these research and reconnaissance teams was a unit called the Devil's Hand, an elite group of fighters equipped with the best that the Enclave had to offer, including the extremely rare pre-war X-02 power armor. During one of their missions, one of the members of the unit deserted, abandoning the Enclave, but taking with him some of their technology. He thought that the Enclave was fighting a losing battle. Their methods were heartless and flawed, and he was overcome by guilt over the people that he killed while serving the Enclave. He eventually made his way to the Commonwealth, where he set up a new home for himself in the underground Boston police rationing site. There, he became a typical wastelander, a scavenger, until one day he discovered some pre-war Hubris Comics holotapes detailing the events of one of the lesser-known superheroes in the Hubris Comics universe called the Black Devil. He was inspired by these holotapes, and as a way to make amends for the evils he did while working for the Enclave, dressed up in his X-02 power armor and became the Black Devil. He used a radio in the Boston police rationing site to tune in to distress signals sent out by wastelanders and settlers in need of assistance. And when he heard somebody in danger, he would jump into his Black Devil power armor and leap to the rescue, defending the defenseless. He became a legend in the wasteland, a mythological figure dismissed by many, but there were true believers who would continue to flock to the radio to call for help in time of need. But there came a day when the Black Devil stopped answering those calls, and that's because this nameless former Enclave soldier eventually decided that he had become too old to live the life of a superhero. And so he abandoned his Exo-2 power armor and his home in the Boston police rationing site to head off into the wasteland to die. But the Enclave didn't know this. Members of his old unit were dispatched by the remaining Enclave forces in the capital wasteland to the Commonwealth to retrieve this suit of power armor. The retrieval teams were led by Enclave soldiers Sergeant Hodges and Officer Bradley. They reached the Commonwealth, and while there, they captured and interrogated settlers, trying to find the location of their missing member, this Black Devil. They eventually found his hideout, but after he had left. We don't know if they ultimately found and retrieved the Exo-2 power armor. It all depends on whether or not they bumped into the sole survivor. The Enclave suffered another loss when a group of gunners took out an Enclave vertibird in the Commonwealth. We learned that some of the surviving Enclave remnants managed to get their hands on some Brotherhood of Steel technology because the gunners who took out this Enclave vertibird managed to walk away with a Tesla cannon. Possibly one of the Tesla cannons that the Lone Wanderer and the Brotherhood of Steel used when assaulting the Adams Air Force Base. In addition to their own lost technology, the Enclave remnants learned that the Commonwealth was filled with pre-war fusion cores, plasma weaponry, and plasma ammunition. And so the Enclave remnants who were still organized set up a field headquarters inside the Atlantic offices in the glowing sea. From there, they sent out Enclave patrols to secure checkpoints in the Commonwealth, much as Autumn had done in the capital wasteland, to harass traders, conduct experiments on fauna, but most importantly, to retrieve any and all lost Enclave technology. This, of course, led them into conflict with many of the Commonwealth's dangerous inhabitants, including gunners and raiders, and even the sole survivor. But even if these outposts were destroyed, even if their field headquarters at the Atlantic offices was destroyed, we know that the Enclave still survived in some way in the Commonwealth. Where they are, who's leading them, what their goals are, aside from retrieving their own lost technology, we sadly don't know. Here, the story of the Enclave on the East Coast ends. But over a decade later, the Enclave on the West Coast reemerges. At the moment, we don't know anything about them. Are they remnants of Dick Richardson's Enclave from Navarro? Could the remnants of Eden's Enclave in Boston migrated all the way to the West Coast? Or could this be a completely different Enclave installation, like the one at Chicago, whose story we know nothing about? At the moment, we have no idea. But we do know that by the year 2296, the Enclave on the West Coast has reestablished itself in a fortified lab somewhere in the mountains, where they continue their experiments and their research, ranging from cold fusion to FEV. Perhaps we'll learn more about this chapter of the Enclave as the Fallout show continues. But for now, that's the full story of the Enclave. If you don't want to miss my next Fallout video, be sure to subscribe. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.
I lost him.
Excellent.
this time.